Get your worthless ass back to the line before I replace you with a machine that actually works. The voice, a rasp of stale cigarettes and cheap coffee, belonged to Frank Miller. It sliced through the deafening roar of the Cleveland Iron Works, a sonic whip that made a dozen hardened men flinch. On the factory floor, a public flogging was a spectator sport, and today, Maya Jackson was the main event. She didn't turn. Her hands, scarred and calloused from years of wrestling with steel, tightened on the I-beam she was guiding onto the conveyor. She felt the heat of 100 curious, pitying eyes on her back. High above, sealed behind the triple-paned, soundproof glass of his executive perch, Adrien Sterling watched the brutal little drama unfold. And in that one, shattering instant, the world he had built over 3 decades of ruthless ambition dissolved into dust. Because as Maya shifted her weight, the collar of her grease-stained jumpsuit slipped, revealing a small, impossibly perfect birthmark on the nape of her neck. A shooting star. The exact same mark he had traced with his finger every single night, 25 years ago, on his missing daughter, Aria. If you're already feeling the tension build, do me a huge favor and smash that subscribe button, ring the notification bell, and drop a comment letting me know where in the world you're watching from. Your support is the fuel that lets us bring these incredible stories to life. And trust me when I tell you, this is one journey you need to see through to the very end. Now, where were we? The 4:15 a.m. alarm screamed into the pre-dawn gloom of Maya Jackson's tiny bedroom in a rundown duplex on the west side of Cleveland. She swung her legs out of the narrow bed, her body, at 28, already a roadmap of aches and pains that belonged to a woman twice her age. The cheap mirror on her dresser reflected a face that was perpetually tired, framed by a riot of black curls she fought into submission each morning with a bright red bandana. It was the only vanity she allowed herself, a single slash of defiance against the gray, metallic world that consumed her days. "Morning, Grandma Rose," she whispered, her voice a soft murmur as she peeked into the adjoining room. Her 80-year-old adoptive grandmother lay sleeping, her breath a shallow, fragile rhythm beneath a well-worn patchwork quilt. On the nightstand, a platoon of orange prescription bottles stood guard, a failing heart, brittle bones, lungs that struggled with every Ohio winter. Each bottle was a link in the chain that bound Maya to the job that was methodically crushing her soul. The Sterling Iron Works sprawled along the Cuyahoga River like a slumbering metal dragon, its smokestacks exhaling plumes of steam into the bruised purple of the November sky. Maya pulled on her gear. Hard hat, steel-toed boots, the faded safety vest that had long lost its brightness. She'd fought tooth and nail for her certifications, acing night classes in metallurgy and structural engineering, but the foreman, Frank Miller, treated her like something he'd scraped off the bottom of his boot. Miles away, in a sprawling lakeside mansion in Bratenahl, Adrien Sterling stood before a wall of glass, a delicate porcelain cup of espresso in his hand. The sun was setting Lake Erie ablaze with strokes of crimson and gold, but Adrien saw none of it. All he saw were the ghosts that lived in the cavernous, silent rooms behind him. At 60, his hair was a distinguished silver, his tailored Italian suit a testament to a life of immense success. His construction and steel empire spanned the entire Midwest. But the mansion, with its 22 rooms, was a mausoleum, a shrine to a life that had ended 25 years ago when his wife, Isabella, had vanished with their 3-year-old daughter, Aria. 25 years of private investigators, dead-end leads, and the same recurring nightmare of a little girl with a shooting star birthmark crying out his name in the dark. His phone vibrated. "Mr. Sterling, your 9 a.m. site inspection at the Cleveland plant is confirmed." his assistant, Patricia, said, her voice crisp and efficient. The union steward requested a meeting to review the new overtime regulations. "Cancel the union meeting," Adrien commanded, his voice flat. He adjusted his silk tie, the knot feeling like a noose. "I'm doing a walkthrough, unannounced. I want to see the real state of things, not the dog and pony show they put on for me." Sterling Ironworks was the crown jewel of his portfolio. He'd bought the failing plant 5 years ago and transformed it into the most profitable facility of its kind in the country. He knew every number, every metric, every efficiency rating. What he didn't know was that employee Jagger 734 was about to detonate his carefully constructed world. Maya clocked in at 6:45 a.m., the air already thick with the smell of hot metal and ozone. The factory floor was a symphony of controlled chaos, sparks raining down from welding stations, the earth-shaking thud of hydraulic presses, the shrill scream of steel being cut to order. She headed for her station, a critical junction where beams for the new Metro Health Tower were being finalized, but a wall of cheap cologne and resentment blocked her path. "And where the hell do you think you're going, Princess?" Frank Miller stood with his arms crossed, his considerable gut straining the buttons of his supervisor's shirt. He was a man pickled in bitterness, his thinning hair and permanent sneer the outward signs of a deep-seated mediocrity. He had made it his personal mission to make Maya's life a living hell from her first day. "To my station, Mr. Miller," Maya said, her voice low and even, betraying none of the acid churning in her stomach. "The Metro Health beams have a critical deadline." "Not today, college girl." He spat a stream of brown tobacco juice into a nearby bin. "The real work is for the real men on this floor. You're on slag cleanup. Get a bucket and a shovel." Maya's jaw locked. "Mr. Miller, my quality assurance scores are the highest in this division. The Metro Health contract specifically requires a Level 3 certified welder." "Listen here, you affirmative action charity case." Frank stepped closer, his voice rising, deliberately drawing an audience. Workers up and down the line slowed their rhythm, their eyes darting over, sensing blood in the water. "I don't give a damn about some worthless piece of paper you got from night school. This is my floor, my rules, and I say you're shoveling crap today. Now move." He jabbed a thick finger toward her, and in a moment of pure, unconscious defiance, Maya reached up to adjust the collar of her jumpsuit, the rough fabric chafing her neck. The movement was small, insignificant, but it pulled the fabric taut across her shoulders, and for a fleeting second, it fully exposed the delicate, star-shaped birthmark at the nape of her neck. It was at that exact moment that Adrien Sterling stepped out onto the mezzanine overlook. He'd intended to observe from a distance, but Frank Miller's booming voice had drawn him to the railing. His gaze settled on the confrontation below, on the young woman standing her ground with a quiet dignity that reminded him so fiercely of Isabella. And then she moved her collar. The world stopped. Time fractured. The roar of the factory faded into a distant hum. The shooting star. 2 inches wide, a perfect, celestial trail, exactly where he'd placed 1,000 goodnight kisses. The mark he had told 3-year-old Aria was a sign from the angels that she was destined for greatness. Adrien's knees buckled. The porcelain espresso cup slipped from his numb fingers, shattering on the grated floor. The sound was lost in the industrial din, but to Adrien, it was as loud as a gunshot. He couldn't breathe. He couldn't think. 25 years of agonizing uncertainty, of hollow hope and black despair coalesced into this single, impossible image. It had to be a trick of the light, a hallucination brought on by decades of grief. Down on the floor, Frank saw the big boss appear on the overlook and preened, his voice swelling with self-importance. "See, even the owner agrees with me. Trash belongs with trash. This one's better suited for a mop than a welding torch." At the word owner, Maya spun around, her gaze traveling up to the mezzanine. And for the first time, Adrien Sterling looked directly into his own eyes. Not just similar, identical. The same shade of deep amber, flecked with gold. The same determined set of her jaw. But it was the way she tilted her head. A small, inquisitive gesture Arya had made as a toddler whenever she was concentrating, that sent him staggering back against the railing, his heart a wild bird battering against the cage of his ribs. His mind was a maelstrom of impossible calculations. Arya would be 28 now. This woman looked 28. Arya had that birthmark. This woman had that birthmark. But Arya was gone, swallowed by the past along with Isabella. This was a coincidence, a cruel cosmic joke. Maya stared at the man in the $1,000 suit, at his ashen face and shaking hands. She was used to being invisible to men like him, a cog in their vast machines. But this was different. He was looking at her as if he'd seen a ghost. "Are you all right, sir?" she asked, her voice carrying across the space, a note of genuine concern in it that cut through Adrien's shock. That voice. Sweet Jesus, that voice. It was Isabella's melody, but with a strength, a resonance, that was pure sterling. Adrien opened his mouth, but the words were trapped in his throat, choked by a quarter-century of unshed tears. Frank Miller, utterly oblivious, pressed his attack. "Don't you worry about him, Jackson. The rarefied air up there makes men soft. Now pick up a damn shovel before I write you up for insubordination." The word insubordination was the spark that ignited the dynamite. 25 years. 25 years he'd imagined his daughter safe, loved, cherished somewhere. And instead, she was here. Here, in his own factory, being degraded and humiliated by a man who wasn't fit to shine her steel-toed boots. "Miller." Adrien's voice was a blade of ice, slicing through the factory's clamor. Every head turned. Every machine seemed to pause. "My office. Now." Words. But Adrien couldn't look away from the young woman who might be his Arya, grown up into someone strong and beautiful and unbroken, despite everything. The woman who looked at him like a stranger, with no idea that she might be looking at the father who had never, not for 1 second, stopped searching for her. He descended the metal stairs from the mezzanine, each step a hammer blow against his skull. The factory floor fell into an eerie hush as he approached, the workers melting back to their stations, pretending not to watch the impending execution. Only Maya remained, rooted to the spot, her amber eyes wide with a confused, wary curiosity. Frank Miller puffed out his chest, a pathetic attempt at bravado. "Mr. Sterling, just handling a little disciplinary issue. This one's got a real attitude problem. Thinks she's too good for honest work." Adrien stopped a few feet from Maya, his gaze devouring every detail of her face. Isabella's defiant chin, his own stubborn brow, the way she bit her lower lip when she was nervous, a habit Arya had as a toddler. "A problem, employee?" Adrien repeated, his voice dangerously soft. His hands were clenched into fists at his sides, the knuckles white. "Enlighten me, Miller. What is the problem?" Mistaking Adrien's quiet fury for tacit approval, Frank's confidence swelled. "She's a troublemaker, sir, always questioning safety protocols, filing petty grievances. One of these diversity hires, you know? They come in here with a chip on their shoulder, thinking the world owes them something." Maya's back went rigid. "I was pointing out a potential structural flaw in the welding specs for the Metro Health beams, Mr. Miller. A flaw that could lead to metal fatigue and catastrophic failure." "See what I mean?" Frank scoffed, a raw, ugly sound that grated on Adrien's last nerve. "Little Miss Engineer here. Thinks her degree makes her better than men who've been doing this for 30 years. It's always the same with these people." These people? The phrase landed like a punch to Adrien's gut. Someone was calling his daughter, his aria, these people. While she stood there, taking it, her posture radiating the same proud defiance Isabella had shown when facing down the sneering wives of his early business partners. He took a half-step closer to Maya, his eyes finding the shooting star on her neck again. The memory was of physical pain. 3-year-old Aria, draped in a pink blanket, giggling as he called it her angel kiss. "What is your full name?" Adrien asked, his voice rough with emotion, speaking only to her, ignoring Frank completely. "Maya Marie Jackson, sir," she answered, her voice clear and strong. "Jackson. Not Sterling. Of course not." Isabella would have changed their names, erased every trace of their past life. His daughter had a whole life, a whole name that he knew nothing about. "And your qualifications?" he pressed. "Associate's degree in metallurgical engineering from Cleveland State," she said, a flicker of pride in her eyes. "Level 3 welding certification, OSHA certified safety inspector. I'm 2 semesters away from my bachelor's degree in structural engineering." As she spoke, Adrien's phone buzzed. The caller ID read, Donovan Price Investigations. The firm he'd had on retainer for 25 years. The man who was supposed to find his daughter was calling him at the exact moment she was standing 3 feet in front of him. The irony was a bitter pill. He declined the call, his thumb jabbing at the screen. How many millions had he spent? How many dead-end leads had Donovan chased? And she was here. All this time she was right here. Frank misinterpreted Adrien's silence as a sign he was losing the argument. "See, boss? She's all talk. These people don't understand the natural order of things. They don't know their place." The natural order. That was it. That was the phrase that broke him. He saw Aria's entire life flashing before his eyes. A life lived without him, without the privilege and protection he could have provided. A life where she had to fight for every scrap of respect, where she had to endure the casual cruelty of men like Frank Miller. He pictured the empty nursery in his mansion, a room he had left untouched for a quarter of a century, waiting for a homecoming that felt more impossible with each passing year. "The natural order," Adrien repeated, and his voice was so devoid of emotion it was terrifying. He took a slow, deliberate step toward Frank. "Explain that phrase to me, Miller." Frank, drunk on his own perceived victory, blundered on. "Well, you know how it is, Mr. Sterling. A man like you, a born leader. It's in the blood. And then there's others. They're good for the grunt work, but they just don't have the breeding for the skilled positions. It's just genetics." Breeding. Adrien's control snapped. In a move so fast it was a blur, he lunged forward, grabbed Frank by the front of his shirt, and slammed him back against a steel support column. The impact echoed across the silent factory floor like a cannon shot. Frank's feet left the ground as Adrien, fueled by 25 years of rage and grief, lifted him with terrifying ease. "Genetics?" Adrien snarled, his face inches from Frank's now terrified purple one. "You just insulted my daughter's breeding, you ignorant piece of filth." Dead silence. The only sound was the hum of distant machinery. Maya's mouth fell open in shock. Every worker within 100 yards was frozen, their eyes wide. What are you talking about?" Frank wheezed, his hands clawing uselessly at Adrien's grip. The words were out. Adrien knew he'd revealed too much, too soon, but the inferno in his chest was beyond his control. This man had been tormenting his daughter, his area. "Security!" Adrien roared, the single word a command that brooked no argument. 2 guards materialized instantly, their faces grim and professional. They'd seen the boss's temper before, but never like this. "Mr. Miller is terminated, effective immediately," Adrien announced, his voice ringing with absolute authority. Escort him off the property. Inform him that if he ever sets foot on any Sterling Industries property again, he will be arrested for trespassing. He dropped Frank, who crumpled to the floor, gasping for air. The guards hoisted him up by his armpits. "You can't do this," Frank sputtered, his face a mask of disbelief and fear. "I'll sue! Wrongful termination, hostile work environment." Add assault, racial discrimination, and creating a hazardous workplace through negligence to that list. Adrien shot back coldly. "I'm sure our HR department has a thick file on you. And Miller." He waited until the terrified man's eyes met his. "My influence in this city is extensive." "You will not work in this industry again. Not here. Not anywhere." The guards dragged the sputtering foreman away. Adrien stood, his chest heaving, the adrenaline slowly beginning to recede, leaving a profound emptiness in its wake. Then he turned to face the woman who was the cause of it all. Maya was staring at him, her expression a maelstrom of confusion, fear, and dawning comprehension. "You called me your daughter," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "What did you mean?" The fury drained out of Adrien, replaced by a vulnerability he hadn't felt in decades. He had planned this moment 1,000,000 times in his mind. A gentle approach, quiet investigation, irrefutable proof before he ever spoke a word. But his rage had burned all his plans to ash. And now, his daughter, Aria, was looking at him, waiting for an explanation he had no idea how to begin. How do you explain 25 years of silence? How do you bridge a chasm that wide without shattering both of you in the process? "We need to talk," he said finally, his voice hoarse. "Privately. There are things you have a right to know." Maya took a half step back, her defenses slamming back into place. "I don't know what kind of game you're playing. You can't just fire my supervisor and start calling me your daughter. I think you've made some kind of terrible mistake." "There has been a mistake," Adrien agreed, his voice thick with a lifetime of regret. "A 25-year-old mistake, but not the kind you're thinking." He pulled out his phone and dialed his assistant. "Patricia, cancel my entire day, everything. Reschedule the board meeting, postpone the Henderson deal, and send the car to the main plant entrance, now." "Adrien," Maya said, and the sound of his first name from her lips sent a jolt through his entire nervous system. "I can't just leave. I need this job. My grandmother, she depends on me." His grandmother. Of course, Isabella had been raised by her grandmother, Rose. If this was his Aria, then Rose would be the woman who had kept her safe all these years. "Yes, Grandma Rose. She's sick. I'm all she has." Maya's voice softened, the fierce defensiveness replaced by a weary love. "I can't lose this job over some bizarre misunderstanding." Adrien's heart fractured a little more. His daughter, his heir, was worried about a factory job, was caring for an elderly woman on a welder's salary while he rattled around a mansion that could house a dozen families. "You're not going to lose your job," Adrien said, his voice firm with a promise he would move heaven and earth to keep. "And your grandmother's medical care, it will be handled. Completely. Regardless of what happens after our conversation." A flash of anger sparked in her amber eyes. "I don't take charity. I've worked for everything I have. I don't need some rich man to ride in on a white horse because he feels guilty about something." That fire, that stubborn pride, it was so perfectly, painfully familiar. It was Isabella, arguing with him about his lavish gifts. It was him, staring back at his own reflection. "It isn't charity," Adrien said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "It's restitution. It's what I should have been doing for you all along." The black Bentley sedan glided to a stop at the factory entrance, its silent arrival a stark contrast to the industrial clamor around it. It looked like a spaceship that had landed in a junkyard. "1 hour," Adrien pleaded, extending a hand not to touch her, but toward the open car door. "Just give me 1 hour to explain. If you still think I'm crazy, you can walk away, and I will never bother you again. But if there is even the smallest chance that what I believe is true, don't you deserve to know who you really are? What would you do in her shoes? Faced with a reality so impossible it sounds like a movie plot? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below." Maya looked from the opulent car to the shocked faces of her co-workers, then back to the raw, desperate hope in Adrien's eyes. Whatever she saw there, it was enough. She gave a slow, hesitant nod. 1 hour, she agreed. "But I'm not taking off this vest, and this doesn't make us friends." For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, a real, genuine smile touched Adrien Sterling's lips. She had his eyes, Isabella's voice, and both of their negotiating skills. As she slid into the plush leather interior of the car, his phone buzzed again with a call from Donovan Price. This time Adrien answered. "Donovan, drop everything. Meet me at my office in 30 minutes, and bring the entire Area Sterling file, every page." "Did you find a new lead?" Donovan asked, the hope in his voice worn thin by years of disappointment. Adrien looked at the young woman sitting across from him, her worn safety vest a vibrant, defiant slash of color against the car's monochrome luxury. "I think," he said, his voice thick with a hope so fierce it terrified him, "I think I found her." The supple leather of the Bentley felt like an alien skin against Maya's worn denim work pants. She kept her safety vest on, zipped to the chin, a fragile shield against the suffocating luxury of her surroundings. Adrien sat opposite her, the silence in the soundproofed cabin thick with unspoken questions. "Your grandmother," Adrien began, his voice carefully neutral. "Rose, how long have you lived with her?" Maya's guard shot up instantly. Men like him didn't make small talk. They gathered intelligence. "Since my mom died. I was 16. Why?" "Rose, she raised your mother too, didn't she?" Adrien pressed gently, watching her face. "Your adoptive mother, Isabella." The word adoptive landed like a slap. Maya had never told a soul at work she was adopted. It wasn't in her file. It wasn't a secret, but it was hers. "How did you know I was adopted?" she demanded, her voice sharp. Adrien winced. He'd done it again, let his desperation outpace his diplomacy. The truth was, he'd had Patricia spend the night pulling every public record, every digital breadcrumb connected to Maya Jackson. But he couldn't admit that without sounding like a predator. "It was an educated guess," he said, then shook his head in self-disgust. "No, that's a lie. I had my assistant look into your background after the incident on the floor. I needed to understand." Maya gave a short, bitter laugh. "You had me researched? Like I'm a corporate acquisition? What right did you have to dig into my life?" "None," Adrien admitted, the word tasting like ash. "I had no right. But Maya, what I found, it changes everything." The Bentley slipped into the private underground garage of Sterling Tower, a 40-story monument of glass and steel that stabbed at the Cleveland sky. Maya felt the immense weight of the building pressing down on her. This was Adrien's world. She was just a trespasser. "I don't want to go up there," she said quietly. "This is wrong. You're the owner of the company. I'm a line worker. There are rules." Her words were a fresh stab of guilt. She was trying to protect herself with HR policy, because he'd given her no reason to trust him. "You're right," Adrien said, surprising her. "This is completely unorthodox, but I'm not asking you to come upstairs as my employee. I'm asking, as a man who has been searching for his daughter for 25 years. The elevator ride to the penthouse floor was a silent, tension-filled ascent. Maya stared at her reflection in the polished brass doors, a woman in a dirty jumpsuit, looking utterly out of place. Adrien watched her, memorizing the proud line of her jaw, the stubborn set of her shoulders. It was like watching a ghost of Isabella. Patricia, his assistant of 20 years, stood as they entered the palatial outer office. Her professional poise faltered for a fraction of a second as she took in Maya's appearance. "Mr. Price is waiting in the conference room, sir," she announced, recovering quickly. He brought the files. Donovan Price was 62, with the weary eyes of a man who had spent his life sifting through other people's secrets. He rose from a leather chair as they entered, but his professional greeting died on his lips when he saw Maya. He stopped, his gaze fixed on her face, and his jaw went slack. "Adrien," he breathed, looking from her to the billionaire and back again. "My God, where did you find her?" "Find who?" Maya demanded, her patience gone. "I want answers. Now. No more games, no more cryptic remarks." Adrien moved to a large, ornate safe built into the wall. He spun the dial, the soft clicks echoing in the silent room. Inside, wrapped in silk, were the sacred relics of his daughter's life. A pair of bronze baby shoes, a lock of dark, curly hair, and a faded photograph. 25 years ago, Adrien began, his voice trembling as he placed the photo on the massive mahogany conference table. "My 3-year-old daughter Aria disappeared with her mother. They vanished without a trace." Maya looked at the photograph. The little girl in the picture was laughing, her head tilted at a familiar angle. She was staring at her own eyes. "That doesn't prove anything," she whispered, but the conviction was draining from her voice. Donovan opened a series of thick, worn binders, spreading 2.5 decades of fruitless searching across the table. Missing person reports, witness interviews, financial forensics, dead ends. The paper trail of a father's obsession. "Aria Isabella Sterling," Donovan read from the original police report. "Born October 3, 1997. Disappeared August 12, 2000. Distinguishing marks: a small star-shaped birthmark on the nape of her neck." Maya's hand flew to her neck, her fingers tracing the familiar shape through the fabric of her jumpsuit. "When is your birthday?" Adrien asked, though he already knew. "October 3rd, she answered automatically. "But that's a coincidence. It has to be." Adrien laid a tiny, yellowed hospital bracelet on the table. The plastic was brittle with age, but the name was clear. Baby Girl Sterling. 10-397, Cleveland Clinic. Maya's own birth certificate, the one she'd used to get her driver's license, her job, her entire identity, listed the same date, the same hospital, but it had a different name. A different life. "This is insane," she said, backing away from the table. "You think I'm your long-lost daughter because of a birthmark and a birthday? Do you hear how crazy that sounds?" Have you ever had a moment where your entire reality was shaken to its core? A moment where nothing made sense anymore? "There's more," Adrien said gently. He opened another file. "Your adoptive mother's name was Isabella Jackson. Before she married your adoptive father, her maiden name was Isabella Rosales. She was a music teacher." The room started to tilt. Maya grabbed the back of a chair for support. Her mother, the woman who had raised her, had been a music teacher before she married the man Maya knew as her father. She'd never mentioned a previous life, a previous husband. "My mother died," Maya said weakly. "Car accident when I was 16. She never said anything." Donovan consulted his notes. Isabella Rosales married Adrien Sterling in June of 1996. The divorce was finalized on August 10, 2000, citing irreconcilable differences. She and Aria vanished 2 days later. "Vanished?" Maya repeated, anger flaring to life, a welcome defense against the overwhelming confusion. "Or escaped? Maybe she left because you were a monster. Rich men don't just lose their families." The accusation struck Adrien with the force of a physical blow because he knew, in his heart, that there was truth in it. He had been a monster of ambition. He'd worked around the clock, obsessed with building his empire, treating his family like a beautiful acquisition he could visit on weekends. Isabella had begged him to be present, to be a father and not just a provider. Maybe I was, he admitted, his honesty disarming her. Maybe I was so focused on giving you a world of privilege that I forgot to give you a father. Maybe she was protecting you from me. The confession hung in the air. Maya had expected denials, excuses. She hadn't expected this raw, painful accountability. But that doesn't change the fact that you are my daughter, Adrien continued, his voice thick with emotion. And for every single one of the 9,125 days since you've been gone, I have wondered if you were alive, if you were safe, if you knew that you had a father who loved you. Maya's composure finally fractured. If you loved me so much, why didn't you find me? A man with your power, your resources. I tried, Adrien said, gesturing to the mountain of files on the table. We looked everywhere. Your mother was brilliant. She created a new identity for both of you that was virtually untraceable. She wanted to disappear. Because you were dangerous, Maya shot back. What did you do? What were you involved with that made a woman run for her life with her child? The question landed. Adrien and Donovan exchanged a look, a flicker of shared history, of secrets buried so deep they were almost forgotten. Maya saw it. I made powerful enemies in the early days, Adrien said carefully. Men who wouldn't hesitate to use a man's family against him. What kind of enemies? Maya pressed, sensing the evasion. Just then, Adrien's phone, lying on the table, lit up with a text message from a blocked number. He glanced at it, and all the color drained from his face. The message was short, brutal, and aimed like a sniper's bullet. We know you found her. Some ghosts are better left buried. We need to do a DNA test, Adrien said abruptly, shoving the phone into his pocket. To prove it, for both of us. I'm not giving you anything, Maya said, her fear and suspicion crystallizing into defiance. I don't know you. I don't trust you. And I'm beginning to think my mother was a damn genius for getting me away from you. Donovan stepped in, his voice calm and reasonable. Ms. Jackson, Maya, please, consider this. If he's wrong, a simple cheek swab proves it. You walk away, and he never bothers you again. But if he's right, he paused, letting the weight of the words settle. If he's right, you deserve to know the truth. Maya looked around the opulent office, at the sweeping view of the city she'd only ever seen from the ground. This could be her world. A world without aching joints and dwindling bank accounts. A world where Grandma Rose had the best medical care money could buy. But it was also a world of secrets, bodyguards, and anonymous, terrifying threats. It meant accepting that the woman who had loved her, sacrificed for her, had lied to her every single day of her life. If I do this, Maya said slowly, and if this test says what you think it says, then what? Am I supposed to just become Arya Sterling, forget the last 25 years, forget that my mother was so afraid of you she chose a life of poverty and fear over a life with you? Adrien's face was a mask of pure agony. I expect nothing. If you are my daughter, you owe me nothing. I am the one who owes you. For every birthday I missed, every school play I wasn't at, every time you were scared and needed your father, and I wasn't there. His sincerity was a wrecking ball to her defenses. She had come up here expecting a battle of wills with a ruthless tycoon. She had not been prepared for a broken man begging for a chance at redemption. One test, she said finally, at a neutral lab, and we both get the results at the same time. No backroom deals. Agreed, Adrien said instantly. As Donovan made the call to arrange for an immediate test at the Cleveland Clinic's genetics lab, Adrien's phone buzzed again. Another text from the blocked number. This time the word sent a sliver of ice through his veins. Aria doesn't know what kind of monster her father really is. Maybe it's time she learned about the Falcone family. The genetics lab at the Cleveland Clinic was a world of sterile white and hushed efficiency. Dr. Evans, the lab director, was a no-nonsense woman who explained the process with practiced calm. "Given the circumstances, we can expedite the analysis," she said. "We should have a definitive result in 4 hours." 4 hours. In 4 hours, Maya's world would either snap back to its familiar, difficult shape, or it would shatter into a million unrecognizable pieces. She sat in a chair, her ridiculous safety vest a splash of color in the colorless room, feeling like a specimen under a microscope. Adrien sat opposite her, a silent, coiled knot of tension. After the cheek swabs were taken and sealed, Dr. Evans left them with the promise of a 5 p.m. result. "We can wait in my office," Adrien offered. "No," Maya said immediately. "No more towers. No more reminders of the world you live in. If we're going to wait, we do it on neutral ground." They found a small, quiet coffee shop in University Circle, a place filled with students and the comfortable scent of old books and brewing coffee. Adrien, in his immaculate suit, looked like a hawk in a sparrow's nest. He ordered a black coffee, same as her, though she suspected he hadn't had drip coffee in 30 years. "Tell me about her," Adrien said, his voice quiet. "Isabella, your mother, what was she like?" The question surprised her. She'd expected him to spend the next 4 hours trying to convince her, to plead his case. Instead, he wanted to know about the woman who had taken his daughter from him. "She was fierce," Maya said, the memories bubbling up. "And kind. She worked 2 jobs after my dad died, never complained. She taught me that your dignity doesn't come from your bank account. It comes from how you carry yourself." A pained smile touched Adrien's lips. That was Isabella. She had a spine of pure steel. I fell in love with her the first time I saw her argue with a zoning commissioner over a permit for a community music school. "Then what happened?" Maya asked, the question slipping out before she could stop it. "What went so wrong that she had to run?" Adrien stared out the window, his reflection a pale ghost in the glass. "I was young, arrogant. I wanted to build the biggest empire this city had ever seen, and I was willing to make deals with anyone to do it. The Falcone crime syndicate controlled the construction unions, the supply chains, the politicians. To build in this city, you had to pay tribute to them." "You worked for the mob," Maya said, the words flat and cold. "I made a deal with the devil," Adrien corrected, his voice heavy with self-loathing. "I told myself it was just business. I funneled their dirty money through my legitimate projects, and in return, my company grew at an impossible rate. Isabella knew. She begged me to get out, but I was addicted to the power, the success. By the time I realized the price, it was too late. Rico Falcone, the head of the family, made it very clear that my pretty wife and my beautiful little daughter were his insurance policy, his guarantee of my loyalty." His phone buzzed on the table, another blocked text. His face went white as he read it. He tried to hide the screen, but Maya saw the terror in his eyes. "Who is that?" she demanded. "Who keeps texting you?" "It's complicated," he hedged. "I'm tired of complicated," she shot back, her voice low but intense. "If I'm about to find out that I'm the daughter of a mob-affiliated billionaire, I think I have a right to know who his enemies are." Before he could answer, Donovan Price slid into their booth, his face grim. "We've got a problem," he said, no preamble. "Someone just tried to hack the clinic's computer system. They were specifically targeting the new DNA sample records. They knew about the test, Adrien." Adrien's head snapped up. "How? We just arranged it." "Your office is bugged," Donovan said flatly. "Your car, your phone, they're listening to everything. Whoever this is, they don't want you and Maya to connect." A cold dread washed over Maya. This wasn't just a family drama. This was something dangerous. Enough, she said, her voice shaking but firm. The truth, all of it, now. They retreated to Donovan's office, a secure, anonymous space in a downtown warehouse that had been swept for bugs that very morning. For the next hour, Donovan and Adrien laid out the ugly truth. Adrien had been a key player in the Falcone syndicate's money laundering operations. When the FBI finally started closing in, they had offered Adrien a deal: testify against the Falcones, and he would get immunity. He was their star witness, Donovan explained, showing her newspaper clippings from the trial 5 years ago. His testimony sent Rico Falcone to prison for life. It dismantled their entire organization. So my mother, she ran because she was afraid of the Falcones? Maya asked, the pieces clicking into place. Worse, Adrien said, his voice barely a whisper. She ran because she was afraid of what I had become, and she was right to. A week before she disappeared, Rico Falcone told me that if I ever even thought about betraying him, he would make me watch him kill my wife and daughter. She heard him. That's why she ran. Not just from the mob, Maya. She ran from me. A single hot tear traced a path through the grime on Maya's cheek. Her whole life, she had believed she was abandoned, unwanted, but the truth was, she had been protected. Her mother had sacrificed everything, her home, her name, her entire life, to save her. Donovan's phone rang. It was Dr. Evans from the clinic. He put it on speaker. I'm emailing the results now, the doctor's voice said, but I felt I should call. The probability of paternity is 99.999999%. Mr. Sterling, congratulations, you found your daughter. The words seemed to echo in the silent room. Maya felt the floor drop out from under her. She was Aria Sterling. It was real. Adrien made a sound, a choked sob of relief and pain, and 25 years of anguish, and for the first time, he reached across the table and took her hand. His touch was hesitant, trembling. And at that exact moment, his phone buzzed with one final text message. He read it, and his face turned to a mask of pure terror. He showed it to Donovan, and then to Maya. Rico Falcone died in prison last week. His brother Marco just got out, and he knows exactly where Grandma Rose lives. The race back across town was a blur of terror. Marco Falcone was nothing like his brother Rico. Rico was a businessman. Marco was a psychopath, a man who had spent his life as the family's enforcer. If he had Rose, he wouldn't hesitate to hurt her. They screeched to a halt in front of Maya's duplex. The lights were on, but there was an unnatural stillness to the place. Stay in the car, Adrien ordered, pulling a concealed handgun from a compartment under his seat. Like hell I will, Maya shot back, her fear replaced by a cold, hard fury. That's my grandmother in there. They approached the front door, Adrien moving with a tactical precision that spoke of a life spent anticipating violence. The door was unlocked. He pushed it open slowly. The living room was empty. A half-finished cup of tea sat on the small table next to Rose's favorite armchair. Rose? Maya called out, her voice trembling. A man stepped out of the kitchen. He was older, his face a roadmap of prison tattoos and old scars, but his eyes held a chilling, dead-eyed calm. It was Marco Falcone, and in his hand he held a revolver, pressed firmly against Grandma Rose's temple. Adrien Sterling, Marco said, a slow, cruel smile spreading across his face. So good to see you again, and you must be little Aria. You've grown up. My brother would have loved to be here for this family reunion. But thanks to your father, he died in a cage. Rose looked at Maya, her eyes filled not with fear, but with a fierce protective love. I'm sorry, baby girl, she whispered. I tried to keep you safe. Let her go, Marco, Adrien said, his own gun leveled at the man's chest. This is between you and me. Oh, it's between all of us now, Marco sneered. You took my family, Adrien, so I'm going to take yours. But I'm not just going to kill you. That's too easy. I'm going to make you choose. The same way you chose to save yourself by testifying. Who dies first? The old woman who raised her? Or the daughter you just got back? Adrien stood frozen, trapped in an impossible choice. 25 years ago, his choices had cost him his family. And now, the ghosts of those choices had come back to make him pay the final price. He looked at his daughter, his Aria, and saw not a victim, but a fighter. Her eyes were locked on Marco, but she wasn't looking at the gun. She was looking at the floorboards, at the heavy cast-iron wood stove in the corner, at the frayed electrical cord running behind it. Her engineer's mind was working, calculating, looking for the structural flaw, and in her eyes, Adrien saw a glimmer of a plan. The stale air in the small living room was thick enough to taste, a mix of old lavender potpourri and metallic fear. Marco Falcone's grin was a gash in his scarred face. This was the moment he had fantasized about for years in his prison cell. Adrien Sterling, the man who had everything, brought to his knees, forced to choose which part of his world to lose first. "Tick-tock, Adrien," Marco taunted, pressing the gun harder against Rose's gray hair. "It's a simple choice, the past or the future. Which one do you sacrifice?" Adrien's gaze flickered from Rose's terrified but defiant face to Maya's. And in his daughter's eyes, he saw it. Not panic, not despair, he saw calculation. He saw the same intense focus she'd had on the factory floor when she'd spotted the flaw in the welding specs. She was analyzing the situation, looking for a weak point. He just had to buy her time. "You're wrong, Marco," Adrien said, his voice surprisingly calm. "It's not a simple choice, because you've already lost." Marco's smile faltered. "What's that supposed to mean? I've got the gun. I've got your family." "You think this is about them?" Adrien took a slow, deliberate step into the room. "This was never about them. This was about you and me. You want revenge for Rico? Fine. Here I am. Let them go and you can have me. No tricks, no police. Just the justice you think you're owed." It was a gamble, a desperate play to shift the focus. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw Maya take a tiny, almost imperceptible step backward, her hand moving slowly toward the heavy cast-iron poker that rested by the old wood stove. "You think I'm stupid?" Marco snarled, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. He had planned for a broken, pleading victim. He hadn't planned for this quiet, unnerving acceptance. "I think your brother was the smart one," Adrien said, pushing the button. "Rico built an empire. You were just the muscle, the attack dog he kept on a leash, and when he was gone, you had nothing. No power, no plan, just this pathetic half-baked revenge fantasy." "Shut up!" Marco roared, his composure cracking. He gestured with the gun toward Maya. "You little Aria! Tell your father what a hero he is while I put a bullet in this old woman's head." But Maya wasn't looking at him. Her eyes were fixed on the frayed electrical cord snaking out from behind the ancient stove. It was plugged into an overloaded power strip, a fire hazard Rose had been meaning to fix for months. "He's right," Maya said, her voice clear and steady, and both men turned to look at her. "You are pathetic. You're so blinded by a 25-year-old grudge that you didn't even do your homework." "My homework?" Marco repeated, confused. "This house," Maya said, taking another slow step, her fingers now inches from the iron poker. "It was built in 1920. It still has most of the original knob and tube wiring. That stove? It draws more power than the entire electrical system was designed to handle. All it would take is one little surge." She locked eyes with Adrien, a silent question passing between them. "Can you create a distraction?" Adrien understood. He took a deep breath. "Marco, Do you remember the last thing I said to your brother in that courtroom? I told him I was going to spend the rest of my life making sure my daughter had the one thing his money could never buy her, a world without men like him in it. As he spoke the last word, he lunged, not at Marco, but to the side, knocking over a tall, rickety bookshelf. It crashed to the floor with a deafening explosion of splintering wood and old books. In that same instant, Maya acted. She grabbed the heavy iron poker and, with all her strength, jammed it into the overloaded power strip. The effect was instantaneous. Sparks erupted in a blinding flash. Every light in the house blew out, plunging the room into absolute darkness. The air filled with the acrid smell of burning plastic and ozone. Marco, momentarily blinded and disoriented, fired the gun wildly, the muzzle flash a series of strobing, terrifying images. Rose, freed from his grip in the confusion, dropped to the floor. Adrien, using the darkness as cover, tackled Marco from the side, a brutal, driving collision of two aging but still powerful men. They hit the floor in a tangle of limbs, grunting and cursing. Maya scrambled on her hands and knees, her hands sweeping the floor, searching for the gun that had been knocked from Marco's hand. Her fingers brushed against cold steel. She grabbed it just as Adrien managed to land a solid punch on Marco's jaw, dazing him. "Maya, the light!" Adrien yelled. Maya's phone. She fumbled in her pocket, found it, and switched on the flashlight, pointing the bright, steady beam at Marco's stunned face. Adrien had him pinned, one knee on his chest, his own gun now pressed under Marco's chin. Sirens wailed in the distance. Donovan, waiting in the car, had called the police the second he heard the gunshot. It was over. As police officers swarmed the house, Maya helped a shaking but unharmed Rose to her feet. The two women clung to each other, the grandmother who had raised her and the granddaughter who had just saved her. Adrien walked over to them, his face bruised, his expensive suit torn. He looked at Maya, his daughter, who stood illuminated in the flashing red and blue lights, covered in dust, holding a gun, looking more like a warrior than an heiress. The fear and adrenaline slowly drained away, leaving behind a profound, bone-deep certainty. 25 years ago, he said, his voice thick with emotion, your mother ran to protect you from my world. Tonight, you saved us all from it. 6 months later, the garden behind the new house was filled with flowers and laughter. Adrien had bought Rose a comfortable, safe home in a quiet suburb, a place with reliable wiring and a garden she'd always dreamed of. Maya walked down an aisle of green grass on her father's arm. She wasn't wearing a designer gown, but a simple, elegant dress. She was marrying a kind, intelligent man, a structural engineer she'd met in one of her night classes. Adrien placed her hand in her fiancé's. "I missed your first steps," he whispered to her, his voice choked with tears. "I am so damn proud to be here for these." Donovan Price was there, acting as the best man. Even Frank Miller, the disgraced foreman, was there. After hitting rock bottom, he'd entered a recovery program. Maya, in an act of forgiveness that stunned everyone, had offered him a job managing the warehouse for a new foundation she had started, the Rachel Martinez Castellano Memorial Center for Family Reunification, funded by Adrien but run by Maya, used cutting-edge investigative techniques and a network of volunteers to help reunite families separated by poverty, injustice, or tragedy. As the sun set, casting a golden glow over the celebration, Adrien watched his daughter dance with her new husband. She caught his eye and smiled, a radiant, joyful expression that healed a wound in his soul he'd thought would be fatal. He had spent half his life building an empire of steel and concrete, a legacy of power and wealth. But he knew now that his real legacy was standing right there, in the middle of the dance floor. It wasn't about what he had built. It was about what he had, against all odds, managed to rebuild. A family. Broken, Scarred, but finally, blessedly whole. Thank you for staying with me through this roller coaster of a story. If it moved you, if it made you believe in second chances, please give this video a like and share it with someone who needs to hear it. The story isn't just about a billionaire finding his daughter. It's about finding the best version of ourselves, even after we've made mistakes. And if you think this ending was powerful, just wait. The story I have for you next is going to change everything you think you know about fate and destiny. Click on the video that's appearing on your screen right now. You absolutely do not want to miss it.